ranking every single technique in Jujutsu Kaisen. You read the title, no need to explain too much, but I'm just going to mention how I rank these. We will be deciding placements off three things. Firstly, how difficult is it to fight against or counter this technique? Secondly, how lethal it is. And finally, how much utility does it provide? You get a score out of 10 for each category, and if two techniques share the same score, I will put the one I believe to be better on top. Keep in mind, very important, this is overall usefulness, not weakest to strongest. For example, Kashimo's technique is super strong, but because he dies after, he loses a lot of points. So with that all out of the way, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy, and yeah, let's hop into it. Now we have the absolute worst curse technique in the entire series. Ladies and gentlemen, I request a drum roll. Fucking sugar manipulation. Now, most of y'all don't even know what I'm talking about, but this Giga Bum that we saw in Season 3 has the ability to manipulate sugar. He can change his own sugar levels and even manipulate that into physical form, usually pudding. No, I'm not joking, that's literally all. His only use was helping to give Yuta slight amounts of sugar for his brain to help it running a tiny bit longer when he was near death. He made about a 0.1% difference in this one hyper-specific niche moment. His technique gets a 0 in difficulty to counter, 0 in lethality, and a 0.1 in utility from this one scene. So you think his final score is a 0.1 out of 30? But no, I left out one part from his curse technique for this moment. When he makes pudding, he suffers from low blood sugar and gets lightheaded. Okay, because of the recoil, he loses that 0.1% and is now at 0 out of 30. Congrats, sir. You officially have the most dog shit useless curse technique in all of Jujutsu Kaisen. Next up, in 63rd place, we have one of the most useless techniques I've ever witnessed. It's Monkey Fuck Remy's technique with her scorpion hair. It's not even like the technique is decent and she's just bad at using it. The technique itself is just bad. I'll give it like a 1 in difficulty to counter, a 1 in lethality, because she literally hits Megan with it and he just looks mildly inconvenienced. And finally, a 0 in utility for a total of 2 of 30. Overall, a pure trash can through and through. Now we have Tengen's Immortality. This straight up, unironically, may be the worst one in the entire list. She's immortal, but her body still ages. So if she doesn't assimilate with someone every few hundred years, she'll turn into an ugly, crusty toe monster thing. 0 out of 10 in difficulty to counter or lethality. But I'll give it a 3 for utilities because since you have so much time in your hands, her techniques become more polished. But honestly, it still may be the worst one in this list because of what immortality actually means. You watch all of your loved ones die and are forever alone. And the only way to put an end to it all is to die. Overall, I personally would want this one the least. Next up, we have this Gigabum Chizuru with his ability to turn his fingers into little black claws. Yeah, anyone can just put on brass knuckles with spikes and achieve the same effect. I'll give it a 1 out of 3 in all categories. Overall, pretty shit, so that's why he's all the way at the bottom of the list. Next up, we have Mai's Creation. Now, I'm aware Yaoyorozu also has the same curse technique, but honestly, I'm ranking their creations as different techniques just off the sole reason I like to bully Mai. Mai's Creation is monkey fuck trash compared to Yaoyorozu's. It takes literally all of the energy she has in a singular day to make one tiny ass bullet for her revolver. She uses a revolver to shoot 6 bullets, and then with her technique make a secret 7th to create confusion with her foes. Because of this slight trick, I'll give her a 2 on difficulty to counter, a 1 in lethality, and also a bonus 1 point for utility. Because if she sacrifices her entire life, she can create much stronger objects like the soul split katana from Maki, which we saw in season 3. So for all of that considered, she earns a measly 4 out of 30 at the bottom where bro belongs. Next up, funnily enough, over Mai, we have the absolute Giga Chad GOAT, Junpei. His technique is the singular jellyfish shikigami that poisons its targets and causes pain and even paralysis, while also having spikes at the end of its tendrils. So, you know, I'll give it like a 2 in lethality and counter ability. Sandstone with poison can be difficult for weaker fighters. The fact bros over Mai though just makes me laugh. Now, as a surprise to no one near the bottom of our list, we have this walking they them's curse technique. Haruto's miracle ability. It erases the chances of him having small miracles in life, like watching your car's miles reset. It stores all that luck in markings under his eyes that bail him out of life-threatening situations with miracles. It basically just gives its users extra lives, which on paper sounds useful, but in practice it's fairly shit. When you verse anyone weaker than yourself, you just win by default, so you don't need the extra lives, and when versus anyone who's stronger than you, like Nanami, doesn't really matter how many lives you have, as they'll just keep killing you over and over again. I'll give the difficulty to counter a 3, utility a 3, and lethality 0 for a whopping 6 points total. Now we have one of the elite level bums from the Kyoto school in Momo. Her curse technique is tool manipulation, which allows her broom to fly, strike, or summon gusts of wind barely stronger than a fart. I'll give counter ability a 2, since it can be kind of hard to deal with someone flying around. Lethality is a 1. I mean, this fart cloud isn't going to kill anyone unless they already have severe lung issues. And finally, the utility is a 3 because being able to fly around and have a bird's eye view can be useful. Next one's kind of weird to rank. It's this guy's inverse ability. Basically, the harder you hit him, the less damage it does, and vice versa. But there are caps to its minimum and maximum, because if not, then even a gust of wind would kill him. This one gets 0 points for utility or lethality, but because it is kind of a tricky technique to figure out, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Only problem is if they figure it out like Mega Man Yuji did, then you're straight up just fucked. Next up, we have this bum's helicopter hair from season 3. It's quite literally as simple as it sounds. He has blades on his head. He can use like a helicopter to slice and dice anything in his way. I'll give him a 3 for counter ability because you definitely need to be pretty mobile to dodge it. A 4 in lethality because if you get trapped and surrounded, you could be cooked. And finally, a 3 in utility since he can fly around like Momo. Unfortunately for bro, I will be deducting 2 points for the fact he has to aim his head at targets to attack. Yes, let's put our most vulnerable body part at the front of the attack. That's smart. Now, this next one is just shit, honestly. It's the Kyoto Principle's sound amplifier technique. By using his own body as an amplifier, he uses his electric guitar to send waves of cursed energy at his opponents. This is just dumb. In order for it to be useful, you have to carry a big-ass guitar around with you everywhere you go, and if it gets damaged, you're cooked. We've seen it deal some decent damage, so it gets a 5 in lethality, a 3 in counter ability since trying to dodge it could be hard, and finally a 0 for utility for a total of 8. This technique is just not that good. Urahime's solo forbidden area. She can temporarily increase the curse energy of any willing sorcerer and herself within a certain radius, and by adding the dance, hand gestures, incantations, and music, it can become a ritual, raising the effectiveness to 120%. Now, we have to realize, without all the extra shit, it's not 120%, it's less. I don't know, maybe like 110% instead. Your whole technique of making yourself 10% stronger and nothing else is kind of cheeks. Plus, if you're in mid-fight, you're never going to be able to get this ritual off. So the only reason it does get credit is because before a big group fight, she's more of a supportive character. Being able to buff the group by 20% is fair enough. So 2 in counter ability, 0 in lethality, and finally 6 in utility for the group buff. But overall, I think this one is just pretty bad. Next is a Mythical Beast Amber. And before any of you Kashimo Glaziers start freaking out in the comments, let me explain. If you have any brain cells, you'll probably know why this is up here. By turning his flesh into raw energy, Kashimo can enter a godlike state where all of his stats get a dramatic boost, allowing him to run the ones with a weakened Sukuna, even if only for a bit. Its counter ability is a 9 because, you know, once he starts moving at these speeds, less than 5 characters in the verse could probably even react to him. A 9 in lethality because, once again, you know, he's gonna farm you. Sounds great, right? No. As much as he becomes near unstoppable in this state, its downside is so big that I'm just deducting 10 points from it. Out of everything on this list, Mythical Beast Amber has the worst downside. When converting his flesh into energy, he can't undo it. So once activating the technique, he will die. That's why in the manga, he doesn't use it against anyone since he's saving it for Sukuna. Having to die when using your curse technique is too ass. Keep in mind, it only seems fine for Kashimo because his base form is so strong. He doesn't need his curse technique for most people. But if you were to give this curse technique to like Mai, it would actually be straight up useless since 99% of people would curb stomp her, causing her to use her technique, which would guarantee her the win against most opponents. But then you die at the end. So it's like, it's too much of a downside. As funny as it is to say, Airplane Hair Monkey over here is above the mighty Kashimo's curse technique. It's kind of like the helicopter guy from before, but I think it's a slight bit better. She has an engine from her hair that allows her to fly around at insane speeds. Its counter ability is a 3 because it's pretty hard to deal with the target and it can move so fast. 3 in lethality for ramming into people as we saw, and finally a 3 in utility for just, once again, being able to fly around at high speeds. Now cracking our top 50, we have Mimiko's doll technique. She can, I guess, kill people by tying a rope around the doll's neck, which she did against the Jujutsu High managers. Problem is with this technique and the next one is that we know so little about it that it may be much weaker or much stronger than we think. We just don't know since they got washed by Sukuna in an instant. I'll give counter ability a 5 since it's some sort of voodoo shit, and lethality a 4 because she can hang targets or attack vital points, and a 0 in utility. Once again, we just don't know anything about her or its limitations, so this is my best guess. If you're going to rank it much higher or lower, I wouldn't argue or care against it at all. Just really quickly, want to let you guys know we do have a Patreon where I'm reacting to One Piece. He's still going! Oh! And the block manga. Konigami fucking saved it! So if either of those sound interesting to you, check it out. Now, crossing the 10-point threshold, we have our friend Nanako's camera technique. It allows her to manipulate targets she takes a photo of. Now, this one could be busted theoretically, but highly unlikely. We know she can at least teleport herself, which we saw once, but it tired her out. Once again, like the last technique, we just don't know the limitations of this at all. Like, she can manipulate things in her photos. Like, if she were to put a filter on them and make them extremely fat, do they just turn really fat and can't fight anymore? Or like, what? I don't know. I'll give counter ability and lethality a 3 with utility of 4 since we saw her teleport. But once again, we just don't know. Next, in 48th, we have Granny's Seance technique. By getting the corpse of any deceased sorcerer, she can conjure their body for her or someone else to use in battle for a little bit. Now, this one's kind of hard to rank because her effectiveness is based solely on what kind of vessel she summons. Most of the time, they'll probably only conjure some tier 3 shitter who really can't do that much. But in those rare moments she can conjure someone like Toji is where this technique's effectiveness can skyrocket. So because I think it's so case dependent, I think it's fair to just give a 5 for all 3 categories. Although she loses 5 points total because of what is required to even do this. As we've seen in the anime, she has to sit down while doing some sort of chant for at least a bit of time in order for it to work. This is a massive weakness to the ability. If you turn the corner and Maharaga appears from your pockets, you do not have time to sit down and activate your technique. So yeah, everything considered, it's relatively mid at a 10 out of 30. Next up, I just know people in the comments are going to try to touch my asshole for this one, but Nanami's technique is just not that good. He's a strong character, don't get me wrong, but he's not strong because of his technique. His technique is more or less just being able to crit whenever he wants. He forcibly creates a weak spot in anything he wishes at a ratio point of 7 to 3. You know what? Actually, this is exactly like Fortnite. No, I'm not joking. When you mine something, that spot appears, you know, where like the damage doubles. It's basically this. It's cool and all, but in a world filled with such insane destructive output and crazy hacks abilities, it just doesn't cut it. I'll give a 5 in counter ability since you really don't want to be hit by this, 6 in lethality for the same reasons, and then obviously 0 in utility for a total of 11 points. Next, we have Iori's exploding flesh technique. By removing parts of his body, he can ignite them and use them as explosions. Pretty simple with this one. I'll give him a 7 in counter ability and lethality because fighting against constant explosions can be pretty difficult. Although I am actually revoking 3 points from this technique off the fact you literally need reverse curse technique for it to be of any use. This guy keeps taking himself apart and fixing himself, but over like 90% of the verse couldn't use this technique as they just wouldn't be able to heal. And even if you could, you literally ripping your eyes and teeth out. This is maximum pain, and this shit would be AIDS to use. Imagine every time you want to attack, you gotta gouge your eye and teeth out. No, thank you. Now for my goat, Lore? I don't know. His technique is heart catch. He can summon a giant hand to grab and pin enemies, or probably even crush them if he tried. We also see in the Sukuna fight, he can quote unquote catch their hearts, which is basically just forcing their attention to him, which seems useless until you realize in group fights, it's pretty fucking useful. He also takes 10% of the damage back that's done on the hand, but whatever. Counter ability is a 4, lethality 2, and finally utility is a 5. Now we have Choso's younger brother's rot technique. Basically, by getting their blood on someone, it activates the decomposition of their body. It's basically guaranteed death unless you cut off that part of your body that it hits or make them turn the technique off like we saw at the end of season 1. I'll give the counter ability a 5 because it's fairly difficult to fight an opponent while also worrying about constantly dodging their blood attacks. Lethality is 7 because, you know, it takes a while to kill and, you know, you can kind of counter it if you know how, for a total of 12 points. This guy doesn't even have a name in the story, but the box-headed guy's cloning technique is actually kind of strong. He can make up to 5 clones at once, and he can switch his main body to any of them whenever he needs, which makes him pretty hard to deal with if you're not a top-tier character like Gojo. I give difficulty to counter a 6 because, first of all, there's 5 of them, and he can switch main bodies whenever. 4 for lethality because, once again, there's 5 of them. And then finally, a 3 for utility because he can switch positions around the battlefield pretty easily. And 42nd, we have one of the most simple techniques. It's Junichi's Missile Fist. Basically, he can just pull a Deku from My Hero and summon a shit ton of fists from the sky to flatten the battleground. Counter ability is a 6 because the range is pretty big, 7 in lethality, and finally a 0 in utility for 13 total. Now we have my favorite piece of calamari in Dagon. His curse technique is Disaster Tides. You know, honestly, this technique is kind of underwhelming for how strong he is. He basically has the ability to summon infinite amounts of water in the battlefield, which sounds busted until you realize you can use curse energy to stand on water. So, you know. Now, obviously, they can't do that if he drops thousands of gallons of water on their head. But the truth is, for higher tier characters, this water basically may as well not be there. But this technique is still mildly difficult to deal with, so I'll give it a 5 in counter ability, 2 in lethality, and finally a 6 in utility. Keep in mind, without his domain, he was getting fisted by Nanami and Nobito. Decent, but definitely the weakest out of the disaster curses. Next up, we have my goat Miguel's prayer song. Off topic, but is it a little racist that the one black character in the story has a technique having to do with dancing? I don't know, a little suspicious. This low-key has some sauce to it though. By dancing to a beat etched to his body, it basically buffs him, debuffs his opponents, and gives him like a tiny version of Ultra Instinct basically. When using it, he was actually low-key going Goku versus Kefla, dodging all of Sukuna's slashes and surprisingly getting a few good licks in. On top of that, Sukuna even found his technique interesting. You know, people always give Jogo credit for having his only fights being against Gojo and Sukuna, but like, I'm not crazy, right? Hasn't Miguel also only fought Gojo and Sukuna? I'll give difficulty to counter a 7 because he's hard to hit and debuffs his opponents, 2 for lethality, and finally a 5 for utility for having that mini version of Ultra Instinct as well. Now, I'll be surprised if any of you guys even remember this guy, but Charles, the manga guy who fought Hikari in the Cullen games, he uses his staff, and if he draws blood, he can basically see your moves coming from within 1 second in the future, and the more blood he draws, the further he can see. Obviously, this is a relatively strong ability, but its limitations are to the strength of the user. In his case, he's not even necessarily weak, but against someone faster or stronger than him like Hikari, they can just jump to his blind spots and lay pipe. I'd give it a 7 on difficulty to counter because once this does hit you, unless you're very strong and fast like Hikari, there's not really much the average sorcerer could do here. 0 in lethality for obvious reasons, and 7 utility for once again having foresight to dodge attacks and find openings. In 38th, we have Maki's Failure of a Father, Ogi's technique, Blazing Courage. This technique Ogi claims to be equal, if not superior, to Naoya and Naobito's projection sorcerer technique, but that's just him giga sniffing the copium. His technique allows him to eject flames from his blade to a decent size by the look of this, while also being able to change the intensity of it. In a fight, having a super long fire sword that can basically cut through most things is definitely hard to deal with and deadly, so I'll give him a 7 in counter ability and lethality, while a 0 in utility for a total of 14. This is Ino's technique, Auspicious Beast Summon, and truthfully, I knew nothing about his technique before looking on the wiki, and I also would wager most of y'all don't know what the fuck his technique is either, so don't worry. By covering his face with the Shiesty, he can summon the powers of 4 magical beasts. I'm gonna butcher the names of all these, by the way. First is Kachi, which gives him the ability to shoot that heat-seeking horn. Second is Rikai, which covers him in cursed water, which allows him to cushion more damage and slide around with a faster mobility. Third is Kirin, which basically blasting steroids while also allowing him to temporarily ignore pain, although it drains his stamina. And the fourth and final beast is Ryu, which summons a big dragon in battle to help him fight. Overall, honestly, a pretty solid and adaptive ability so far, so I give him 5s across the board, having the first technique to break the 15 barrier. Now in our 36th spot, we have Ranta's Paralyzing Gaze. This seems to me, at least, like a strictly group fighting technique. When looking at an opponent with extreme concentration, he can hold them in place, even restraining Maki for a few seconds, who at this point in the story was magnitude stronger than him. In a group fight, he would be utterly disgusting by freezing opponents for his voice to deliver the kill shot. I'll give counter ability a 7, while utility an 8, for an overall total of 15. Overall, great technique that would be an insane asset to any squad. Now we have all of our favorite femboys technique in Love Rendezvous. Genuinely one of the most insanely confusing techniques in the entire story. There's 5 stars based off the Southern Cross constellation, where you can place 1 star on any object or person, and the person marked has to approach the stars in a specific order, or they will be unable to ever reach the target. Kind of like Gojo's Infinity. The reason this technique is so high is because it's genuinely insane to try and counter. A 99.99% of people are not figuring this technique out in a 1v1. Watching Megami decipher her technique during season 3 was like watching Einstein create his theory of relativity. Being able to get near some stars while others suck you in versus repel, while also all being based on a star constellation. 0 people, if watching this video right now, me included, would ever figure this shit out in mid-fight. So I'm giving it difficulty to counter a 9, 1 for lethality, and finally 5 for utility. Super underrated curse technique. Next up is a fairly strong technique. Based on our gradient scale, it doesn't get too many points. It's Kenjaku's Brain Transfer. This is one of the weirdest techniques in the entire story to scale because it's not really difficult to counter or lethal, but it's a 10 out of 10 in utility for obvious reasons. Being able to take over any dead body and use their abilities is like a better version of Granny's Seance technique. I'm giving it 5 bonus points for its raw potential, since if he gets a cracked body like he does, it could be insane. But yeah, this one is just kind of confusing to rank. One high, we have Mekamaru's Puppet Manipulation. It allows him to control a high amount of robots all around Japan with enough power to be around grade 1. Keep in mind also this doesn't include his Gigamech, because that's from his heavenly restriction on how he was able to store that much curse energy. It's not from his curse technique, but just with his normal curse technique, he's still a robot who can shoot Giga Beam, so I'll give him a 5 in counter ability and lethality, and finally a 6 in utility for a total of 16 points. Next up, we have our favorite child abuse victim, Wee Wee. I bet y'all didn't think bro would be this high, but his technique's actually pretty good. It's literally just teleportation, basically. He can teleport to any spot or person he's marked. This is insanely good for group fights, as we saw in the Sukuna match, when he was able to constantly teleport out anyone who's injured to the healer. And on top of being a supportive goat, he also, if they are willing, can switch souls within bodies, which we saw them use before fighting Sukuna to speed up their training process. He's basically just a support demon. 0 for lethality, obviously, but he gets a 7 for difficulty to counter and a 9 for utility, giving him a grand total of 16 points. Now in 31st, we have Earth Manipulation, in which we saw Chojuro use against Maki. We really don't know the extent of this ability, but honestly, to me, it feels more or less just like earthbending from Avatar: The Last Airbender, so more or less anything these guys could do, he could probably do also. I'll give counter ability a 5, and lethality and utility a 6, for a total of 16 points. Finally, cracking the top 30, we have Hanami's Disaster Plants. These are super adaptable that allows Hanami to change the battlefield, suck cursed energy from surrounding plants, and even drain people of their cursed energy. The technique was extremely strong, allowing it to face off against Season 1 Todo and Yuji. I definitely think it's better than Dagon's technique, but I feel like it's still much weaker than the other 2 disaster curses. I'll give it a 5 in counter ability because it is fairly difficult to dodge all this shit, 5 in lethality, and finally a 7 in utility, mainly because having so much spatial control with the battlefield is super important in a fight. Now, surprisingly, making it into the top 30, we have Nobara's Straw Doll technique. Her technique's actually pretty goddamn good. By launching her nail into a body part or even something connected to the opponent, like their cursed energy, she can launch extremely devastating attacks that literally can't be dodged. If they aren't a curse or someone with reverse curse technique, this is pretty much a one-shot move. We see her farm Choso's brother with it, deal massive amounts of damage to Mahito to help Yuji fight, and finally, once again, help give Yuji a massive opening against Ryumen Sukuna himself. I'll give it a 7 in difficulty to counter because if you lose a limb or a finger or even some blood, she can use it to cause some extreme damage and pain towards you. I'll also give it a 7 in lethality and a 3 in utility because, as per mentioned earlier, she used it to force the release of Rot, and it also uses it cross map against Sukuna in the final duel. Now we have probably one of the strongest abilities for group fights in the entire series, Cursed Speech from the Inumaki clan. By saying different command words, the opponent is forced to follow them, but depending on how strong they are, its effectiveness can waver. Like to weaker curses and curse users, he can literally just say die and they will, but if you try that on someone much stronger than him, it probably wouldn't only work, but the recoil damage to him would be massive. Yeah, that's the one downside of this technique. If he overdoes it or tries it on someone too strong, it'll end up hurting him, so -2 points for blowback. I'll give it an 8 for counter ability and utility because most people will be frozen a few seconds bare minimum without any way to stop it, and I'll give it a 4 for lethality because we've never seen it actually able to kill anything that wasn't a decent bit weaker than him. Above Cursed Speech, surprisingly, we have Reggie's technique of contractual recreation. He can create anything on his receipts all over his body, which range from knives to trucks to mopeds to even rock climbing equipment. I think you can probably see where I'm going with this, but his technique is pretty prepared for almost every situation. I'll give its difficulty to counter a 7 since he can literally throw so much random shit at you. Its lethality a 3 because even he admits he doesn't have any big one-shot moves, and finally an 8 for utility because we saw in the fight with Megami, he really has nearly everything he needs at every moment. Next, in 26th, 25th, 24th, and 23rd, we have the 4 characters that were in a deadlock in the Sendai colony before Yuta walked in, touching them all unconsensually. Now, truthfully, we really don't know much about this guy's technique since he was diddled off screen by Yuta, but what we do know is he has a Shikigami that walk around, and anything that crosses its path is sliced and cut. 7 for difficulty to counter, 4 for lethality, and finally 7 for utility. But since Yuta off-screened him instantly, I'm going to assume that means narratively out of the 4, his is the weakest. Now, just above him, I have the special grade Cockroaches technique of Cursed Roaches. Very gross, I'm aware, but he can summon seemingly millions of roaches with cursed energy that can shred anything in their path. Pretty straightforward. I'll give it a 7 in counter ability because it is fairly difficult to deal with this shit coming at you. An 8 in lethality and a 3 in utility since he can control the battlefield with it. Now, entering the top 24, we have Euro's Sky Manipulation technique. She can treat the sky as a surface and pulling in the surrounding atmosphere to either strike with, reverse attacks, or even treat the ground as a blanket, launching the battlefield in disarray as shown versus Yuta and Ryu. I'll give her a 6 in counter ability, 5 in lethality, and finally a 7 in utility for another total of 18. Once again, like the previous 2, it's narratively implied to me at least that she's the second strongest out of the 4, so you know, it makes sense to put her over the last 2. And then finally, I'm 23rd. The strongest of the 4, we have Ryu's Cursed Energy Discharge, the strongest cursed energy output in the entire Sendai colony. Truthfully, an extremely simple technique that's just shooting beams of energy from his head. It's quite literally that basic, but it's extremely effective. Counter ability is a 7 because we see even Yuta struggle against it, an 8 for lethality because most characters getting hit by this are straight up dying. And I'll also give him 3 bonus points for utility since he can really fight at any distance, and also his technique doesn't go on cooldown after domain expansion. Now, above the 4 in the Sendai colony, we have Jogo's Disaster Flames. Clearly, out of the 4 disaster curses, this is the most destructive amongst all of them. This gives him access to basically firebending, but like on crack. He can shoot flames as you could expect, but he can also shoot powerful beams from his head that can burn through just about anything. And as you saw in the Sukuna fight, he can cover the entire battlefield in lava, which I don't think I need to explain to you is extremely hard to fight against. So for these reasons, he will get an 8 in counter ability and lethality, and because he can use his fire to grab and move things around like we saw against Sukuna, I'll have an extra 2 points for utility, bringing his total to 18. Now a step higher, we have Sukuna's Fuga ability. If Jogo's curse technique was a machine gun with 30 bullets, his is like a tank with one massive shot. Sukuna gets out a flaming arrow and shoots basically like a mini nuclear bomb, far hotter than anything Jogo can produce. I'll give the counter ability an 8 because trying to outrun this move is near impossible, but we have been shown it can be stopped or dealt with. And for obvious reasons, it gets a 10 in lethality because if this hits you, you're giga fucked, and a 0 for utility. Now, finally entering our top 20, we have this spokesperson of feminism himself, Naoya Zenin, and his projection sorcery. This technique allows the person to take every 1 second and turn them into 24 separate frames, which his body follows, allowing him to reach insanely fast speeds. And anything he touches also has to write out their 24 movements within a second, or they get frozen. Obviously, pretty much anyone who gets touched by him will understand what to do in that amount of time, giving him 3 openings. We saw this was an insanely strong technique, even able to push back a freshly awakened Maki with the Heavenly Pack. I'll give this an 8 in counter ability because very few characters can even react to this speed, a 6 in lethality because getting hit at such speeds is brutal, and finally a 5 in utility for being able to escape at high speeds or create openings. If he wasn't so prideful and used a sword or a knife with this technique, he would have won every single fight he was in with relative low difficulty. Next for my GOAT, we have Hikari's private pure love train. Hikari's technique revolves around gambling in a pachinko machine. And I know this isn't a video on domains, but Hikari's technique is more or less just what his domain does. The same thing with Higuruma. So for these two characters, we'll be talking about their domains because that's more or less literally what their curse technique is. That's the way they use it, at least. When activating his domain, there is an insane amount of nerd shit going on, and I ain't reading all this. But the way you can imagine it is there's a roulette wheel, and it's constantly spinning until he hits green. In his case, it's a 1 in 239 chance to hit jackpot, but Hikari claims it's never taken him more than 30 spins to hit it. And when he hits the jackpot for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, he is granted infinite curse energy, which basically makes him immortal as he insta-heals from any injury. Unironically, has the best reverse curse technique in the entire series, even outperforming Gojo or Sukuna. To beat him, you either have to wait out the time or obliterate him so completely he can't heal. Option A sounds easier, but the problem is he can just pop the domains as many times as you want. And so now it's a tad bit more obvious why he's so busted. I'll give him a 9 in counter ability because there's a very few people in the entire verse who could really even kill him permanently. Lethality is obviously a 0, with utility finally being a 10 for having basically infinite cursed energy and healing, which is busted. Now in 18th place, we have Mei's Blackbird Manipulation. Listen, I'm aware she's like the GOAT of touching kids, with the sole exception of Epstein, of course, but her technique is pretty fucking good, actually. It's the first technique to break 20 points. She basically has control over these birds, and she can use them to either see what's going on or force them to kamikaze bomb into her targets, dealing insane damage. Her bird strike is strong enough to exercise special grade curses in a single hit, and according to her, only guys at Gojo, Sukuna, and Kenjaku's level are able to shoot down her birds. I'll give counter ability a 7 since it literally is like a ballistic missile, 8 for lethality since it was stated in season 2 no human alive can survive her bird strike, and finally 5 for utility for having multiple birds to use for recon or overall just extra vision. Now getting closer to the top of our list, we have blood manipulation. It's basically being able to shoot your blood out as a half liquid, half solid, depending on what you want. You can shoot it from a singular beam, able to cut through everything and piercing blood, or you can cause explosions, harden it to create armor strong enough to block even Sukuna's black flash or his Fuga technique, or even cause people to fall down throwing up just by grazing them. Overall, it can be used in so many different ways. It's truly an excellent technique. So for these reasons, I truly believe it deserves a 7 all across the board, being our first technique to crack 21 points. Next up, this is a technique we truly barely see anything from because I believe it's only used in one fight, but we have Kenjaku's anti-gravity technique, originally belonging to Yuji's mother before he stole her body. This is actually a pretty strong technique because any projectile or close combat attacks can be negated by slamming them into the floor. I'll give this an 8 for counter ability because even against super strong characters like Choso, they are rendered completely helpless on the ground. 5 in lethality, and finally an 8 in utility because not only can he protect himself from all sorts of danger when he uses it, he can also use it to escape a black hole. probably one of, if not one of the only characters in the entire series who could have survived that final attack. Now we're getting closer to the peak, entering the top 15, and in 15th place we have Angel's Technique Extinguishment. Basically, by striking anything or anyone by her Jacob's Ladder, it firstly deals massive damage, but more interestingly than that, it forces the release of any cursed technique, kind of like Toji's Spear of Inverted Heaven, which means yes, this can hit through Gojo's Infinity, and even was used to free him from the prison realm in the manga. She can freely pass through barriers with it. This shit was so strong that when she hit Sukuna with it, Gege had to go back and redraw the chapter so it didn't look like his Pookie Bear Sukuna was such a bum in this scene. I'll give counter ability a 6 since it's not the hardest thing to fight against, lethality an 8 since it destroys most things in its path, and finally an 8 in utility for, reasons stated before. One higher, we have Saul Goodman and his Judge Man technique. Much like Hikari, he's one of the two characters where their domain basically is their technique in a fight. This is definitely one of the best domains in the show. Much like Hikari, it's completely non-lethal. When activating the domain, it prohibits violence from everyone, and Judgment picks one thing you've done in your life and puts you on trial for it. And considering Higuruma is a lawyer and the average person isn't, you'll almost certainly lose. If convicted of being guilty, it will permanently take away your weapon no matter what, never getting that back, special grade or not, it's gone. If you aren't carrying a weapon, it takes away your cursed technique, which renders most sorcerers useless in a fight. And finally, if you have no weapon and no innate technique like Yuji in season 3, you lose literally all of your cursed energy. At this point, you're just fucked. Obviously, for the average sorcerer, the second option is probably the worst, and if you're convicted of a bad enough crime, you get the death penalty, which grants him the Executioner Blade, a magical sword that has the property of killing whoever it touches no matter what. Kinda busted. So I'll give it a 9 for counterability because there's basically no avoiding this technique as we've seen, 5 for lethality because of the possibility of the Executioner Blade, and finally an 8 for utility because taking away either your weapon, technique, or cursed energy is a massive help in any fight. The next one is truly one of the weirdest ones. It's creating cursed corpses like Principal Yaga. Now I'm aware this technique isn't an innate technique because according to him, anyone can do it, but just off the fact that he's the only one we've ever seen do it, may as well just say it's his cursed technique. It's the ability to create sentient life from dolls. We never see the full potential of this because he's killed off, but the higher ups were going to classify him as special grade since he can technically create an infinitely big army of cursed corpses if you wanted to. So imagining this technique at near max potential, I'll give it like a 7 in counterability because even though you can make a shit ton of them, they're not that strong, and then also an 8 in lethality and utility for the same reasons mentioned before. Now in 12th place, we have our first technique that will cross the 24-point border, Urame's Ice Formation technique. It's kind of like the earthbending from before, but just better in every way. In an instant, she can completely nullify multiple extremely strong sorcerers by freezing them. She gets 8s across the board because it's seemingly a near perfect offense, defense, spatial control, and everything else. Think of it kind of like Todoroki's quirk in My Hero. Not the strongest by any means, but pretty much very solid in nearly every scenario possible. So I think it deserves a spot up here. Next in 11th, I have a Heavenly Pact like Toji Maki. Now, before all the fat nerds in my comment sections respectfully explain to me that this isn't a curse technique, just know I'm aware, believe it or not, but considering only 2 people have it in the verse, I'm gonna include it because it's my video and I can do what I want. Having this power like Toji or Maki is literally insane. Being the only creatures on earth with 0 curse energy grants one immeasurable physical prowess. If you have this Heavenly Pact, you basically low diff 95 to 99% of the entire verse without breaking much sweat. When Toji was introduced, he no diffed Teen Gojo and Geto without much effort. It also makes you nearly immune to most curses and raises all 5 of your senses to their absolute max. I'll give counter ability a 9 because truthfully most people aren't keeping up with this speed or power for more than a few seconds or minutes. Lethality a 9 for same reasons, and finally utility a 6 for immunity and increased senses as said before. Now entering our top 10 techniques with a grand total of 25 points, we have Yaoyorozu's construction technique. This is everything my wishes she was. She can create her insect armor using liquid metal that vastly increases all her stats. She had some of the strongest output out of any sorcerer in the Heian era, and finally her trump card is her perfect sphere. In the real world, this is like real life shit I'm talking about now, a perfect sphere is generally thought to be impossible since it would have 0 surface area, generating infinite pressure, eviscerating anything it touches. Unironically, I think this is more devastating than Gojo's purple, so let that sink in. I'll give it an 8 for counterability, 9 for lethality, and finally an 8 for utility. Next in 9th place, we have Yuki, the special grades curse technique of Star Rage. She can vastly increase the mass of her or her Shikigami. The way you can imagine her technique is basically just a better Toji. Just one of her punches is easily able to shatter Kenjaku's arm and keep him on high alert. And by kicking her Shikigami, she was effortlessly able to one-tap a special grade curse. And then finally, on top of everything else, she can increase the mass of something past the breaking point literally summoning a black hole, which was stated to have the potential to destroy the entire planet if she didn't hold it back. If Kenjaku didn't have the perfect counter to this, he would have died here. Overall, a pretty easy 10 out of 10 for difficulty to counter and lethality, because it's a black hole. And finally, a 5 for utility with her Shikigami. Now, finally, for my GOAT Aoi Todo, the character in the series with a 100% win rate, farming anyone he jumps with this boy Yuji. He nor his technique need introduction, but it's the boogie woogie. By clapping his hands, he can swap any 2 targets with curse energy. This makes him so fucking annoying to fight, as with every person he's used it against, they are constantly stun locked and in the blender. And after losing an arm to Mahito, he attaches a Vibra Slap to his arm, now allowing him to swap targets 50 times a second. Even Sukuna said there's basically no adapting to this shit. In a group fight, you're getting jumped, bro. It's only inevitable, as there's actually just nothing you can do. 10 out of 10 in difficulty to counter and utility, and a 0 in lethality. But he gains an extra 5 bonus points for literally having the best supportive technique in the verse, and because he's my GOAT and I'll do what I want. Toto fighting with any top tier in the verse unironically clears everyone in the series. That's how long his schlong is. Nearing the top of our list, we have Sukuna's Shrine technique. It's quite literally just slashes. But don't let the simplicity of this technique fool you for how strong it can be. This is one of the most devastatingly destructive techniques in the series. You can use them up close, at range, or even surround yourself in tiny slashes to not allow weapons to make contact. So I'll give it a 5 for utility. And I wasn't going to include modulo because truthfully, I didn't really want to reread this shit. But bro, after mastering this move for decades, this is what Prime Yuji is able to do with it. Single-handedly eviscerated everything in every direction, negative diffing the reincarnated Mahito. Yeah, there's literally nothing you can do against this, so a 10 out of 10 for counterability and lethality. Now, just outside our top 5, we have Takuba's technique Comedian. Unironically, the strongest technique by far on this list at full power. This technique is just reality warping depending on what bro thinks is funny. Gojo's gonna shoot up purple at him and he's gonna just laugh imagining it as cotton candy and it doesn't do anything. Straight 10 out of 10s for all 3 categories, but he loses 5 points for having 0 control over it. He's actually unaware of what his technique is, and if he were to learn how it works, he would likely lose all of its effectiveness. Even still, he's able to literally fuck Kenjaku, and it's stated that he could rival Gojo himself if he were to somehow master this and just convince himself everything he thinks is funny. He could unironically just solo the verse, but because of the fact he doesn't have any control and probably won't ever get that control, he's in our 6th place. Now for a long drum roll, folks, we have finally entered our top 5 techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen. In 5th place, we have Mahito's Idol Transfiguration. It was thought that if he wasn't killed right then and there by Itadori, his latent potential would make him a problem to even Sukuna himself. By touching any living thing, he can change the shape of the soul in physical form. What that means is if he touches you, you die, as we saw with Nanami and Nobara. He can also stash these transfigured humans to use later to morph into anything he wants or sees fit, while also having the ability to change his own form to whatever he needs in the situation. So he basically has the ability to nearly one-shot anyone, change the environment to anything he wants, and can change himself to any size or form he needs. Super peak. 9 out of 10 counter ability because, you know, if you're touched, you die. 9 in lethality for the same reason, and then 8 for utility for reasons listed before, for a total of 26 points. Next, for 4th place, we have Geto's Curse Manipulation. This is basically the same as Yaga's Infinite Army, but just better and stronger in every way. He has the ability to Pokemon catch and enslave any curse he comes across, giving himself an insanely strong near endless army of curses. And by merging curses into a singularity point, he can fire a powerful blast. This gives him the ability to outnumber any opponent he versus, have counters to nearly everything, and yeah, it's kind of just as straightforward as that. I'll give him an 8 for counter ability and lethality, and finally a 10 for utility. Kenjaku kind of proved to all of us that Geto is just brain dead since he uses the technique 100 times better. Now for our top 3, these are the ones that are just straight up giga busted. If you have these, you should probably be near the top of the verse. Should is a keyword here. In 3rd place, we have Yuta's ability to summon Rika and use copy. Yuta has the ability to summon the Queen of Curses, who has literally infinite curse energy. And then if she eats a body part of another sorcerer, Yuta can copy their abilities for himself. Bruh. I'll just say 27 points total with 9s across the board. You can literally copy countless techniques while also having infinite curse energy, and Rika to help you in any fight. Basically near impossible to fight against and deal with unless you're literally a top tier contender in the verse. And if you're not, Yuta's just grabbing you by the balls and diddling you. Now honestly, I was kind of shocked at how high I put this, but the 10 shadows technique is truly amazing. It really makes you realize how brain dead Megami truly was with this technique. You are first granted demon dogs as the first Shikigami, and you have to summon and kill the other 9 for your personal use. On top of being able to hide or store weapons in the shadows, this is literally, and I know I say that a lot, and unironically perfect for any scenario. And you obviously know why this technique is so busted, but the 10th shadow being fucking Maharaga is literally a cheat code if you know what you're doing. It has the ability to adapt to any and all phenomena it may occur. Now, there's no user in history other than Sukuna that has managed to tame this beast, but if you do, as we saw, you can take down beings like Satoru Gojo. Also, we are brain dead for not figuring out how to tame Maharaga. This ox has the ability to deal more and more damage the longer the running buildup is, so just let bro charge up across the entire country of the US or something, then summon Maharaga to get one tapped. I swear it's that simple. But even if you don't have him tamed, you can literally just do what Yuta's granddaughter did, summoning him, then instantly just hiding in the shadows, baiting Maharaga. But even without Maharaga, if you have high battle IQ like Megami, you can stall and even outplay people significantly stronger than you, like how he did against Toji. Overall, fully mastered, this is arguably the best technique in the entire series. Even Gojo said that himself. It really just goes to show how much of a fucking fraud and bum Megami was. I mean, the famous potential man meme was made specifically because of him. 10 in counterability and utility because barely anyone stopping this. And finally, a 9 for lethality, giving the total 29 points. And now, finally, in our number 1 spot, you can't be too surprised to see it, but we have Gojo's Limitless. And I'm aware its max potential requires the 6 eyes, but just for the sake of the video, we're just going to assume you have it. I mean, what can I already say about this that isn't obvious? 10 out of 10 difficulty to counter because literally only like 3 things in the entire series can even reach him, much less damage him. 10 out of 10 in lethality because what are you going to do when he crushes you with his aura or deletes you from existence with purple? And finally, a third 10 out of 10 for utility for having the ability to manipulate space and time, allowing him to teleport, suck things in, launch them away, and once again having the perfect defense. Truthfully, I can't imagine anyone watching this video and not expecting this to be at rank 1. Now, I could see an argument for 10 shadows being ranked 1, but for me, it's quite obvious why Satoru Gojo throughout heaven and earth is alone considered the honored one. Good job for securing our 1 and only 30 out of 30. So yeah, that's ranking every curse technique in Jujutsu Kaisen. If you enjoyed, subscribe as it helps a lot. Once again, thanks to Goat Yuri for being in the special grade tier of our Patreon, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.